In this chapter, we're going to learn how to send emails using PHP. And by the end of it, we'll be able to have our photo gallery send an email to us every time a user submits a new comment on one of our photographs. So we'll have a notification system set up. Sending email in PHP is both easy and hard. Now, how can that be? The function used to send email in PHP is dead simple, and it's going to be really easy to use. However, it's hard because there are a lot of things that can go wrong along the way that will make it so that our emails don't get received or that we have problems. Remember, once PHP sends the email, it has to go to an email server that will send it out onto the internet. Then it passes through a number of servers along the way till it finally gets to the receiving server, where it probably goes through some spam filters before it's received by our user into their inbox, where it probably also goes through another set of spam filters. So there are a number of places along the way where the email could get stopped, and we would think we were doing something wrong in our PHP, but it was actually some other link in the chain that had gone wrong. So I'm hoping that by telling you this ahead of time, it will keep you from feeling as frustrated, and you'll realize that this just sort of comes with the territory. I'm also going to try and give you some tips along the way to help you avoid some of those pitfalls. To start out sending email with PHP, we're going to need to do a little bit of configuration, and we're going to do that in our php.ini file. That's where we're going to set these essential mail settings, and there are 4 items that we want to look at: SMTP, SMTP port, send mail from, and send mail path. SMTP stands for Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, and we'll talk more about it in a later movie. And send mail from and send mail path are related to a small program called SendMail. SendMail is a real simple application. It doesn't have a graphical interface. It's just something from the command line that sends out email. And PHP will make use of SendMail to get emails from your computer out onto the internet. But there are a couple of problems with SendMail. The first is that most likely Windows machines will not have it installed to begin with. You can download packages and install it yourself, but it's probably not there by default. If you're on a Mac or Linux machine, you probably do have SendMail installed. However, it may be disabled, especially on a Mac. It's often disabled. Now, why would they disable this program? Well, it's because it's such a simple, easy program to have access to that it was very common for viruses to infect people's computers and to then use SendMail to send out spam messages. So by disabling SendMail by default, it forces us to turn on SendMail if we want to use it, and thereby keep viruses from coming on and just secretly sending out emails without us knowing. Now that we've talked about these 4 settings, let's take a look at them in our php.ini file. Just to remind you, if you don't remember where your php.ini file is, you can always look at that PHP info page. We created my_PHP info that would give us that page. And under configuration file path, it will tell us where php.ini is. Mine is in /etc. Yours may be in a different location. That's fine. Just keep track of where it is because that's the file we're going to want to edit. So since we're already on this PHP info page, let's go ahead and look at what our current settings are. If I do a find for SMTP, there it is. So it tells me my SMTP is set up to localhost. That's the default setting. If you want your SMTP server to be your computer, that's what you'll use. Now, an SMTP server is a special kind of mail server that we'll talk about in a minute. Probably you do not have SMTP software set up on your computer. Now, that's also something that you can download and install if you want to get that working. And if you do, you can also set the SMTP port, although port 25 is the standard port, and probably you'll just leave that alone. The other 2 variables that we want to take a look at are sendMail from and sendMail path. My sendMail from, you see, has no value. My sendMail path, though, is a path on my hard drive from the command line that I would use to get to my SendMail program. It tells PHP, hey, here's where the application is located. Now, when I installed PHP, it should have set this for me. So it should be exactly where it ought to be. But we can check and make sure of that by looking for it from the command line. Now, Windows users, again, you probably don't have it, and you probably won't be able to issue these commands from the command line. So just watch and see what we do, because you may be deploying to a Unix machine eventually. Now, if I do echo path, that shows me all the places that it's going to try and look for my programs. So you'll want to make sure that SendMail is in one of those places. I can type which SendMail, and it will tell me if it can find it in one of those places, and if so, which place. And mine was in user sbin sendmail. Yours may have been somewhere else. Notice that is the same place that was here, so I'm set. I'm all good to go. The program is actually in that place, and PHP knows that it's in that place. Now, sendMail from is going to be the from address that it will use by default. Now we don't necessarily have to put this default address in there. We can have no value, in which case when we send mail, we'll have to make sure we specify who the mail is from. But it's also a good place where we could put a default value. Maybe it's something like web server at whatever our domain is. That would be a good send mail from. Or maybe it's your own personal email account that you want to send it from, or something custom that you dream up. There has been a bug that's very common on Windows machines where you have to require a send mail from value. Even if you're not using send mail, even if you don't have it installed, you still have to have send mail from specified as something. So Windows users, you want to keep that in mind. You can also Google for more information on that. But that's a very common bug that a lot of people run into. So if you needed to edit your PHP INI file to set send mail from, you would just want to go to where your PHP file is located. For me, that's in the etc. directory. And then in there, I'll do a listing for everything that has PHP at the beginning, and I'll see my PHP file. And then you can edit it with any text editor. I'm going to use the Nano text editor, which is installed with Macs, php.ini default. And that will ask for my password because I did a sudo. And now I'm in my PHP INI file ready to edit it. You've probably done this before. We can do where is, control, and the W key. You'll see that at the bottom in the description. And I can say now send mail. And it'll take me down here. And it gives me a little bit of information. Windows 32 users, it says do the send mail from. Unix users, it says, don't bother. You just need to do the send mail path. I'm not going to change anything. I'm going to leave my send mail from blank and all my default configuration, but I wanted you to see where these configuration options exist in case you need to fiddle with them until you get it working on your machine. And it may take a little bit of fiddling. Now, if you don't have send mail installed, or if you find out it's disabled, or if the next movie just simply doesn't work for you, don't panic. You can search the internet for help in installing and enabling send mail, but my recommendation is just to watch the following movies so you understand the concepts. But don't try to follow along until we get to the part where we install PHP Mailer, which is going to be much easier to use, much more robust, and is going to completely bypass all of your issues with SendMail because it'll use an SMTP server somewhere else, and that's going to make it a lot easier. So in the next movie, let's try out PHP's mail command and see if we can get it working. You may get lucky, and it may work without any additional configuration at all. So let's try it.